This gubernatorial forum is made possible in part through support of the members of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations, supporting education for a lifetime in the communities they serve.
For faculty, staff, and students at IUPUI, I'm delighted to welcome all of you to our campus. Let me extend a special welcome to elected officials and the staff of their offices that are here today. We are honored to be hosting such a critical discussion about the future of our state here at IUPUI tonight. I would like to thank our candidates for their participation and their ideas. Mr. Rex Bell, former chairman of the Wayne County Libertarian Party, former House Speaker, and IU McKinney grad John Gregg, and Lieutenant Governor Eric Holcomb. I think we owe them an appreciation for wanting to serve the state in this role. Please join me in thanking them. Now, candidates will be joined on the stage this evening by one of our state's most distinguished statesmen, former Chief Justice of Indiana Supreme Court Randall Shepard. Justice Shepard serves as chair of the Public Policy Institute's Board of Advisors and is a visiting professor at our IU McKinney School of Law. Could not be more delighted to have him as a resource and a mentor for our students and our faculty. He will be fully introduced in just a moment. Now, there is no better place than IUPUI for this evening's conversation. Right here in the heart of our country, in the heart of Indiana, and in the heart of this great state's capital city. As an institution of higher education, we educate the next generation, and we foster public discourse that is the hallmark of our representative democracy. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome the co-chair with Justice Shepard of the Thriving Communities, Thriving State, and former Lieutenant Governor, and my good friend, Kathy Davis. Please join me in welcoming Kathy to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chancellor Pater, for your welcome and for your leadership of IUPUI. Because of you and your team and the many volunteer leaders from across the state who led the Thriving Communities, Thriving State process, tonight we look forward to a spirited discussion with our candidates for governor about the future of our state. We are so fortunate for the excellence of the IU School of Public and Environmental Affairs. IU SPIA has been led by Dean John Graham and Associate Dean Lillard Richardson to become the #1 ranked public policy program in the nation. We are very grateful for the energetic and creative work of the staff of the Public Policy Institute. Tonight would not be possible without the talents and persistent efforts of this team over the past 2 years. And many thanks to the SPIA Alumni Association who joined with us in making this evening possible. The Indiana University Public Policy Institute, or IUPPI, is a collaborative, multidisciplinary research institute within the IU School of Public and Environmental Affairs. 4 years ago, PPI led a process called Policy Choices that recommended state action in education and workforce, energy and the environment, and tax and finance. Thriving Communities, Thriving State took a place-based approach, considering policy and action priorities for communities of urban, mid-sized, and rural areas. 3 commissions met for over a year to discuss issues and make recommendations. Tonight's questions of the candidates come from those commissions' reports. The next governor of Indiana will be in the room tonight, laying out a vision for the next 4 years. The IU Public Policy Institute is excited to be involved in such a momentous affair. And now, to moderate tonight's program, Please welcome to the stage the Executive in Residence for the Indiana University Public Policy Institute, the nation's youngest appointed and longest serving former Chief Justice of the state of Indiana, a great legal educator, historian, generous and wise mentor of this work, and ever a friend to Indiana, Randall Shepard.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy Davis, for all you've done for this state and for the Institute. It's an honor to co-chair this effort with you and to be your friend. I am grateful to the university for the chance to be a part of many of its activities, and especially honored for the chance to be part of this one. But like most of you, the core reason why I'm here tonight is that I'm a lifelong Indiana resident who wants Indiana to thrive for another 200 years. And I think you could say that all three of our guests, Messrs. Gregg and Bell and Holcomb, are all people who come to this chore, this task of running for governor, for exactly that same reason. Now, in an age of 24-hour media and constant social media activity, it's a little easy to focus on the headlines and not on the substance. And tonight is designed to be different, and I want to take a minute to describe to you how that will work. Thriving Communities, Thriving State is the second policy choices project which encourages discussion among people in government, in nonprofit, in the for-profit world, in the private sector, about issues that will be crucial to Indiana's future. And as we celebrate the bicentennial, the Thriving Communities Project has framed those questions by looking at communities of different size. Experts from government, from nonprofit, from the private sector have convened in conversations around the state on a number of topics. There are questions like, how do we prepare our children and our workforce for tomorrow's economy? How do we engage leaders in different regions of the state in doing better? How do we preserve and advance the quality of life, the quality of place in cities, towns, and rural areas? And how do we innovate and grow businesses, both big and small? Now, instead of examining these on a kind of global, high-level basis, the project endeavored to do it by convening three commissions that ran along a parallel track depending on size of community. The state's 10 or 12 largest urban areas, its medium-sized city, and its rural areas, to address the unique characteristics and the qualities that Indiana might think about as we move forward. So tonight we continue that conversation with our three guests. Former Speaker of the House, John Gregg, Rex Bell, who is the Libertarian candidate for governor, and the Republican candidate for governor, Lieutenant Governor Holcomb. They'll each come individually without the typical trappings of a partisan election occasion to talk with us about their vision for where Indiana might go. And I'll be asking questions that arose out of the Thriving Communities, Thriving State project with the advice of the people that I mentioned and university faculty and students. And the goal will be to keep the conversation in a tone of open inquiry. It's a part of what the Public Policy Institute is all about. And in keeping with that, I'd like to ask you, our audience, to withhold applauding during the candidate conversations. Now, this is not to say that we don't want the conversation to extend beyond this room. So if you want to post or tweet about it, you just go right ahead. The hashtag will be ThriveIN, real easy to remember. We do want to have an additional level of applause here. It's not all sit and listen. So won't you join me in welcoming in our first candidate, John Gregg. John Gregg. Hi, John. Very nice to see you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I noticed that you've been out of office. I think you didn't run for re-election in '02, as I get it, and so it's now been 14 years.
We always like to say that I voluntarily retired.
Yes.
As opposed to the people retiring you. Yes.
Well, we lost a lot when you were no longer there. But I want to start by asking you what you think has changed about state government in those 14 years. You've obviously kept a very close eye on what we've done, what we haven't done. What are the ways that it's better or not better than it was? Those 14 years, there were two of those years that we had Democratic governors, and most of them we had Republican governors. How do you think Indiana state government's different today than it was in '02?
You know, that's an excellent question. There's a couple of things that immediately leaped to my mind. When I left office in 2002, we had a state budget of about $19, $20, $21 billion, and today it's pushing 30. Yeah. So even though we've had frozen property tax levies and we talk about having leaner and more efficient government, we've had a significant increase in spending is one thing. I think that's important to note. I think that like at our federal level, there's gotten a little bit more loss of civility between the two parties and between people not being able to have a conversation. And that's one thing I was proud when I was Speaker of the House. I won an award that I shared with Brian Bosma, who's now the Speaker for Bipartisan Cooperation. And I think we need more of that. I think we've also turned some issues into politics that don't need to be. Public education would be one good one that I think I could point at that's actually turned too much into more political bickering. And then I think the third thing is probably the ideology. And the fringes in both parties can cause a lot of problems to both political parties, or to those of us that try to be in the middle of the road, which is really where most Hoosiers really are. They're pretty moderate people, maybe stand with one foot right of center and the other one right on the middle. But that ideology, the ideology is not good. There's nothing wrong with having absolute truths, but that doesn't mean that you're wrong and I'm right. You know, we need to find that common ground, taking the best ideas from Democrats and Republicans, and I think we've lost that.
Well, I'd like to say that at least so far, I think the campaign for governor has featured a good, solid, and respectful engagement. Putting aside the campaign commercials, which is a whole different subject, but what you and Eric Holcomb and Rex Bell say, I think has been on the up and up and meets the standard that you just described. I think it's been true of all three of you, and I think people of Indiana are grateful for that.
Well, you know, I do hear a lot of people, and I travel around the state. I think that the partisanship is probably the biggest thing that I hear from people that they don't like, and that could be part of the reason why the last election in 2014, you know, we had the lowest turnout in the country, yeah. which is sad in and of itself. And I'm very proud. We actually put out a paper on how we could increase voter participation. It's on our website and things like that to get more people involved. I mean, democracy really only works if we've got an engaged and well-informed electorate. Mm-hmm.
I want to start on the substantive issues that are in our report in a place that you've already touched on, which has to do with education. You would know, and an awful lot of people in this room would know, that the number of people or the percentage of Indiana's population that either has a college degree, an associate or bachelor's degree, or some kind of recognized certificate has been going up steadily. but so's everybody else's, and we're farther behind. We're behind Ohio and Michigan and Illinois. How does that affect Indiana's economy to have a workforce with lower or not as high level of education? Does that matter in our economic development activities?
Well, I think it's huge. You know, one of the sponsors I see is the Lumina Foundation, and our mutual friend Jamie Marasotis in his book on talent makes it clear that if we don't have the talent to fill some of these jobs, whether they be the traditional skilled jobs or new jobs in the IT day and age and life sciences, we not only will lose them in Indiana, we may lose them in the country. Interesting, as I've traveled the state, no businessman or woman has ever said anything about our tax structure. It's always about our skilled workforce, trained or trainable or skilled, and there is so much we can do. We've got such opportunities in those areas, and just like your proposal in the Thriving Communities and Cities points out, it's essential if we're going to grow those communities, because you have to have the healthy communities to have the healthy state.
So what are 2 or 3 things that we ought to be doing that we're not doing well enough, or that we're not doing at all? Speaking now of the higher education, advanced education, post-secondary education.
Sure. I think one thing we have to do is we need to refocus and also recognize, and this takes a societal change, recognize and give respect to those people that do have that credentialing, whether that is that they've gone through some type of career path or a learn-to-earn or an apprenticeship program. If they've got a credential, as you say, that means something, regardless of the amount of classes or training it's taken, we need to show respect to that, just as we do someone who has an associate's or a bachelor's degree, number one. Number two, I think the other thing we have to do is do everything we can to keep college affordable, and that's always a challenge. I know that from when I was president at Vincennes University. I think the third thing that we can do is we need to make counselors available. I know you ask out of high school, but while we're in high school, counselors today, unlike when you and I were in school where they were talking about college or careers, they have to deal with so many issues. You know, did the children get fed? Did they have a home to go to when school's over? Just a litany of things. And I think having those counselors, as these students are going through, start guiding them toward these career paths, whether it's a credential, an associate, or a bachelor's degree. But even those associate and bachelor degrees need counseling to get into areas where the students can find jobs when they get out.
Just to ask a very direct question about higher ed, do we have a problem with investment? Are we spending enough money, or do we have a problem with organization and connection with high school students, or is it both? What's your view on that?
You know, I think one thing, I think our education, even though you ask high school, I do think it's time that we talk about pre-kindergarten, and you may well get to that later. But I do think that we've done a great job in Indiana, going back to Governor O'Bannon, Governor Kernan, Governor Daniels, on our community college system, and then our regional campuses are out there. They're working, I think, pretty well. We do need to take a look and realize how we go about funding our universities, and we need to do everything we can to accommodate that non-traditional student, which when you and I were young people, if you were going to go and get a bachelor's degree, you went for 4 years. We realize that that only applies to about a fourth of the students today. So I think that it's imperative that we do everything we can to take advantage of our educational system in Indiana. We've got a 35-point economic development program that gears on nothing but it's tying education to high-paying, high-wage growth jobs.
You're right. I was going to ask you about pre-K. Is that, and I think you've made a proposal along those lines. Do you favor universal pre-K financed by the public?
Absolutely. I get excited about that. First of all, we have, Glenda Ritz and I proposed a universal or pre-K kindergarten program for 4-year-olds. It has to have a curriculum. It has to be in a school setting, meals, snacks, etc. 4-year teaching degree for a person. A person has to have a baccalaureate degree to teach this program. We can do it without raising taxes, is the great thing. We find some some of it from the duplication and all we do in testing. We find some of it from taking federal monies that currently have been said, we don't want this federal money. You know, I look at that federal money as coming out of my taxes. And I mean, I've got FICA on my paycheck, so I'm not going to let ideology stop me from getting our tax dollars back in Indiana. And we can do a full-day pre-kindergarten program without increasing taxes. When I've met with Joe Raber, who's the CEO down at Hillenbrand, Dr. Licklider at Lilly, when I talk at Cummins or any of the startup or newer companies we have, all they talk about is the need for pre-kindergarten. There's statistics that show for every dollar you put in it, it saves or it makes and returns $7. So if you take 2 students, Chief Justice, that all they do is go through the public school and at the end of graduation and they go into the workforce. That one that had pre-kindergarten compared to the one that didn't will make $160,000 a year more. That's enormous. The statistics help any and all families, lower dropout rates, high school graduation, certification, associate or bachelor's degree. 2 statistics that really grab me when you're talking pre-kindergarten that we all ought to get excited about is they lead healthier lives and they have longer lives. So education is the key to this, and we cannot talk our economy without talking about our education.
I want to move on to one of the questions that our 3 commissions were very intrigued about, which is the development and the advancement of civic leadership that can help make some of these sort of things happen. Our Urban Commission put on the table ideas like VISTA, which is a federal program for people who interested in revitalizing communities. The mid-sized people, mid-sized communities, we're talking about pipelines. How do they get people from where they are into positions of leadership? And the rural commissions were very concerned about the migration of people out of rural areas, which is going on by the thousands. Do you think do we have an adequate base of local civic leadership, or is there something the state government or somebody else ought to be doing to help encourage and develop and train people to do that crucial work on the local level?
Sure. First of all, I do want to thank you and Governor Davis for the work on the commission report in and of itself. I've read it and really have enjoyed it. We've met with commissioner members. My running mate, Christina Hale, was one of the members of it, and it is an unbelievable tool. It's just not data for data's sake, like it says it's data to put to use. I found it interesting that all of them stressed the need for leadership, even the rural communities. And although I'm many times associated with the rural because of where I live, I've made my living for over half my life literally out of Indianapolis. So I kind of have the big and the small as experience for 35 to 40 years. I think one thing a governor can do is provide that leadership, to have that dialogue where we realize that we have to do everything we can to keep some talent all in our state. Right now, if you look and where our population is growing, we've actually got a net loss as far as people moving into the state, people moving out. That's one of your 4 matrix, and it's one of the 4 matrix we look at for success to see how a Gregg administration is doing. Are more people moving in than moving out? Per capita income, are more people getting credentialing and education, and then our job rate growing faster? But I think what you do as governor, you work as a partner with the other units of government, city, town, county. I think in the last few years we've had a little bit more of an animosity. I think one thing the governor does is work, provide leadership, stay focused on the economy, not on social issues. Stay focused on the economy, which means we're focused on education, which means that we're going to do everything we can to keep people in our communities. If you see, and you've probably seen it, Michael Hubert with the Indianapolis Chamber gave me this really cool map. But it shows challenges for people that's running for governor. It's interesting because it shows the growth in the next 20 years. 5 counties across the top, central Indiana, the football shape from Lafayette to Bloomington, the Louisville corner and the Evansville corner, and down in our area, Jasper. They've all got growth. some of them bigger than others. But the rest of the state, even larger places like Terre Haute, Richmond, Marion, stagnant or drop. And that is a real challenge. So I think anything we can do to maintain leadership in communities, and that means we're going to have to focus on the economy, more business incubators, focus on high growth and high wage jobs. You know, it's essential, as yours pointed out, if we're going to have growth in these communities, we've got to have broadband. And God bless you for mentioning that in this report, because I said a week ago, Monday night, I was at Carmel at an event, and I said 14% of the people in Indiana don't have broadband. And they looked at me like I was from Mars. And, you know, I'm not from Mars, I'm from outside of Vincennes. Right. But what was, I mean, it's just unbelievable in this day and age. And I know you travel a lot. We both know where there's no cell tower coverage. I myself live in an area that doesn't have high-speed internet. And if we're going to keep people in these mid-sized communities and small communities, we've got to have that broadband connectivity. That's part of our infrastructure plan. In fact, that's just as important as roads and bridges and drinking water in this day and age, and wastewater is having that broadband connectivity. And a tip of the hat to your group for acknowledging that.
Well, our Rural Commission felt very strongly about this. I mean, as you know, the city of Fort Wayne was a real leader in making the whole city accessible to people. But that's a lot easier in Fort Wayne than it is in Fort Branch, and just because of the difference in size and capacity. Sure. What does your plan say about what state government would do to help make this happen?
What we do when we talk about our infrastructure plan, using some money from the Next Generation Fund, we put about 60% of it for roads and bridges. We put the other 40% in wastewater, drinking water, industrial water, but also in broadband and in green space, because we all know how important quality of life issues are. What we want to do in broadband is similar to what Billy Graham, the mayor down in Scottsburg, did a few years ago. He got tired of waiting and they installed their own system. Down where you and I live, and I know you wouldn't ever have done this, but people tell jokes on Kentucky. You know, they're our neighbors to the south.
No kidding.
Yes, I know that's news to both of a couple Southern boys here. But, you know, and the same with Tennessee. But the joke, Tennessee and Kentucky both today have statewide broadband. And it's kind of like, why them and not us? So we have monies allotted to that. The talent and technology's there. It's priorities. We can do this stuff without raising taxes, but it's a matter of priorities. And if these small counties, that I believe you guys called rural counties in your report, and these small towns are going to grow, they're going to have that.
Good for you. It's a thing our rural mayors felt very strongly about, and
absolutely,
it's a barrier to.
It's economic, it's quality of life issues, it's all of those.
I want to ask about quality of life. This too was a thing that our three commissions, as you might imagine, look at from different points of view. The urban commissioners mostly look at roads and transit. The medium-sized places talked a lot about how they find local resources to make something happen. By the time you've paid for the sheriff's department or the police department and the fire department, there truly isn't a whole lot left over in general government, and the limits on what they can tax are such that it's very difficult for them to take action on things like local redevelopment and even industrial sites, or the Rural Commission very interested in historic preservation as a way of drawing people into a small town because it has a charm to it. What sort of actions can the state take that look at it from the quality of life point of view?
Sure. I think the one thing we have to do that's quality of life, that's important, that has a huge economic impact, and it's just how friendly Indiana is. We have to be a welcoming community, which means we have to embrace diversity. That was mentioned in all three of these. Life science, life and bioscience needs scientists. You know, advanced manufacturing needs engineers. The IT needs programmers. We have to be a welcoming community. We cannot delve in these divisive social issues. Those are losers for us in Indiana. It paints us as a state that people do not want to move to. I've made it clear that one thing as governor I can do working with these cities, because cities agree with it, is we will work to have civil rights protection for LGBT members of our society here in Indiana, of our state, our fellow citizens. And I think we realize that other cities have done this. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. There are many mayors like former Mayor Ballard and Mayor Brainerd up in Carmel, my friend Duke Bennett. I hope he didn't get mad for me saying that. Mayor Duke Bennett over in Terre Haute and Mayor Winnicky down in Evansville have done this in addition to Democrats. So I think one of the things we do is we become a more welcoming and accepting state. And we've been given a reputation we're not like that. The second thing we have to do is give more, as your report referred to it, flexibility. And that's what allowed these communities to pass ordinances. Right now, I know of a mayor, and in fact, I saw the mayor today, who would like to take some of the hotel motel tax collected in that city to put a cultural trail in. State law doesn't allow it. My question is, who has a better idea whether that city could use a cultural trail than that local mayor and their city council? We've got to give communities flexibility. First of all, the legislature doesn't meet all the time. And second of all, I learned the very first year I was in the legislature, I listened to a debate ad nauseum on Allen County's hotel motel tax. Like you, I live 4 hours away from Allen County, and I'm thinking, well, this is a local matter. Why are we dealing with this? So this local flexibility to deal with these problems and to be able to adapt to these problems in a quick and timely fashion is essential. And we've really handcuffed our local units of government. That would be another difference in the last few years.
I want to ask you a particular question about diversity. We have long-standing conversations in Indiana about the relations between the majority community and the African American community. More recent discussions and a lot of migration of Latinos. What do you think about how well we're doing to be welcoming to that part of the population that's been so mobile, and what else could we do that would be helpful?
Well, I think the first thing, as welcoming as we've been, you can always be more welcoming. Yeah. I'm very proud. Christina Hale, as many people know, is Latina. Her mother was born in Cuba. And I think that the one thing we can do is do exactly what we're doing, having a dialogue. And that's a tough topic to talk on. It's a tough topic, whether you are a minority, be it racially, ethnically born, and this is a second language or a second country for you. Those are tough discussions to have, but that's what a leader does. And I envision us of bringing people together. That's one thing I'm adamant about in a Gregg administration. I want everybody to feel they have a seat at the table. So that means we talk about opportunities for all people that come to Indiana. Are there opportunities there, be it jobs or be it education? Are we welcoming? And I've seen some great things. You know, I live near Washington, Indiana, and Lisa and I saw this probably 2-3 years ago. We were over there on a Friday night getting a pizza, and we were leaving, and when we, like a lot of kids in small towns, they pull on the gas station parking lots and just park their vehicles. What you saw the Latino students, because there's a huge Latino community in Washington, Indiana, for the size of the town. You saw the Latino students and the native-born students, for lack of better terms. You saw them there mixing together. They didn't see any difference. So the kids are way ahead of us on this, and that was what was encouraging. And we talked about it so we can learn, and they do it by dialogue. And if we're going to grow our state, we're going to attract more people. If we're going to have those high-growth, high-wage jobs in IT and in agribusiness and in life and biosciences and advanced manufacturing, we've got to be welcoming.
Well, we've come to the time of that's allotted, and I want to say thank you. It's running for governor is hard work, And we're all grateful for the fact that you've offered yourself up, and thanks for all you've done for Indiana.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. It's an honor to be with you. I do appreciate it, and I appreciate all you've done on the bench and also on history, because we share that great love of history.
Absolutely.
So thank you, and thank you all for participating tonight.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
good
it.
to be
Thank
with
you,
you.
Chief. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our second candidate for tonight is the Libertarian candidate for governor, Mr. Rex Bell. Mr. Bell, thank you. Good evening. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Oh, fresh water.
Yeah, right. Not sure the speaker had any, but it's better to start over anyway. So, just to be safe, you've been in and around the Libertarian Party for a while, and it has been active in Indiana for a while. What do you think it adds to the dialogue? The list of elections that have been won is a short one. I looked at the website, and but it's not shocking. There are people who've won election on the Libertarian ticket, but statewide mostly not, and legislative. But what you obviously think this is a valuable contribution. How would you describe it?
Well, you know, I think what the Libertarian Party offers is limited government. You know, basically we are in the we're of the idea that people should run their own lives for the most part, and government should protect us from force and fraud. And when you get to the state level, there's a few more things that it deals in. But you know, the Libertarians have pretty well defined what government should be in that limited area, and the other parties, you know, continue to grow government. You know, it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and reaches into private lives more and that sort of thing. So I think what the Libertarians offer is a chance to pull government back to where we feel it should be, and certainly give people a chance to vote that way. You know, if there's not a libertarian on the ballot, you know, people don't really have a chance to make that statement. So that's what we're trying to do. And you know, I've run for office different times, different offices, and it's always you know, you run to win, but you also understand that it's not necessarily a loss if you advance a cause and raise ideas that other people haven't raised for a while.
What's an example of an idea that people haven't raised for a while that you think you've
Well,
added?
one thing that we've, you know, we'd like to see the tax code simplified. You know, so many different taxes, and I was telling somebody the other day when I started running for office 16 years ago, and we talked about eliminating property taxes, and you know, we still push for that. 16 years ago, they said we were crazy. Now they say we're unorthodox. So, you know, I look at that as an improvement, and that's, we're gaining ground. And I still may be crazy, but at least if they just think I'm unorthodox, that's an improvement.
Well, I'm going to ask you later how you sustain certain government services without an income tax. I'll get to that in a minute, because I want to begin by asking you about education. I think I noticed that you expressed skepticism or opposition to the advancement of pre-K as a part of Indiana education. Am I right about that, and why are you opposed to it?
Well, you know, it's not so much that I'm opposed to pre-K as I'm opposed to government being involved in pre-K. I have 7 grandchildren, and you know, we've worked with them from the day they were born, and we think it's a family, a parental type of thing that should happen. The problem I have with when we get pre-K and the government gets involved in it, it's like kindergarten. You know, kindergarten started, you know, people that wanted it could take advantage of it, and people that wanted to do their own thing at home through the family could. Now there's a push to make kindergarten mandatory. And we know that whenever government, excuse me, gets involved, once pre-K starts as voluntary, it will end up as mandatory. And certainly there are people that could take advantage of pre-K, and there are churches and organizations that offer pre-kindergarten schooling and babysitting and help and that sort of thing. But what we hate to see is the government getting involved and bringing the force of government into the equation.
Does that work higher up? I mean, it works, apparently, would you say the same thing about kindergarten?
Well, at kindergarten, it's something, where are you going to draw the line?
Right.
If we say that we're going to go to first grade, I would still have kindergarten as a voluntary option, and go first through 12. Certainly, as we get into higher education, we've made provisions for people to get that education. We call it free education. It's not. It's a matter of somebody else paying for it or everybody paying for it. Certainly when you move on up into college, the state-owned colleges, for $8,000, you can get a associate's degree. For $16,000, you can move on up for a 4-year degree. So it's something that we think the state and taxpayers have made that commitment. And if a person doesn't have the drive to invest $4,000 or $8,000 in an education, we don't think that taxpayers should be pushed farther into that. We're not opposed to higher education by any means. What we think people need to look at is the difference between society and government, and what the proper role of government is.
Well, I want to ask you about higher education. It's a central topic in public debate in our state, and probably elsewhere. As you know, we lag behind the country and most of our surrounding states. We're ahead of Kentucky, but behind Ohio and Illinois and Michigan and Wisconsin in the number of residents who actually have a degree of any sort or some sort of recognized certificate. We're getting better, but we're still behind. Do you think that's something we ought to try not? Should we try not to be there? And if so, how would we improve those statistics?
Well, that's something that's pretty well up to the individual. I'm a carpenter. I've been a carpenter for 42 years. So there are different ways of making a living out there. And, through vocational training, through the trades, people can make a very decent living at that. I don't think that we need to push that, a college education is the only answer for everybody. I think we need to examine different ways. How can society get involved and help these people out? Like I said, I've been in the trades and a carpenter for this many years, and it's worked out fairly well. I hope that in another 30 or 40 years I'll be able to retire, and if it works out well. But it is there are viable ways of making a living, and with what we feel we could do to bring more jobs into Indiana, I don't think we're lagging behind as much as people say we are. Certainly, there may be some of the higher degrees that we have a lower percentage of people with those, but I think we can, by getting government out of the way, create opportunities where that's not the only thing that we should judge Indiana on.
Well, would you say that things like advanced manufacturing and research, the medical research that's now a part of the Indiana economy, does take an advanced degree or a bachelor's degree? Do you think that the fact that we have fewer people with those credentials is an economic problem that the state ought to worry about? Or would you say better for the state not to do anything and we'd simply let that happen in whatever way it happens?
Well, yeah, I think the state can back off of some things and allow people to come in. I don't see it as being a big problem if there's business here and the demand for those people. You know, our economy needs a little bit of a boost. That we think, you know, we have a solution for that. And as you draw more people in and people, as we get more jobs, it requires more people. So we'll have people moving back in instead of moving out, which I know is something that we all desire, is to have an increase in population instead of a decrease in population. So do we think the government can handle that situation and help people get a higher education? I don't look for the government to do that. I look for the job market to create that need for higher education.
Okay. I want to ask you about local activity, local civic leadership. Our three commissions did share a number of points on which they all thought the communities of different sizes were equally impacted by in ways that weren't desirable. The urban communities thought that there needed to be stronger programs for people who were interested in community building and place of life building. There's a federal example of that. There's a state example called Lilly Fellows. The mid-sized communities thought that there needed to be training for people. How do you get in? How do you break your way into community leadership? And the rural people very concerned about loss of some of the best and the brightest into urban areas. Do you think that that local community leadership in our state is as strong as it needs to be? And well, let's start there. Or is that something we ought to collectively be concerned about and put our shoulder to the wheel on?
Well, I think what we need to do is try to get business people involved in it. Mm-hmm. You know, when we talk about training, when somebody talks about training politicians, that scares me to death. You know, so what I'd like to see happen is promote businessmen to get involved in it, business people, I guess I should say, where I'm sitting up here. But you know, this is when we look around at what drives the community, what drives the state. It's business. It's the people that have created those businesses that have done that. So as we draw more business into the state, you know, I think we need to, I guess I would say as a society, have those people step up, have people volunteer and step up that have the training, that know how to run a business and know how to, and therefore know how to run a government, because you know, we would prefer a government to be run more like a business, a little leaner and a little meaner and that sort of thing. So as far as trying to train politicians, that concerned me a little bit. It wasn't something that I thought we should push. I think the talent is out there. It's a matter of getting them involved.
So would the government be cheerleading these efforts? It wouldn't actually, in your view, it'd be a mistake for government to take any particular action or spend any money or move things around in one direction or another? You know,
whatever they do, whatever they can do to set people up voluntarily, you know, I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that. Cheerleading is a great role for government. You know, as far as getting forcefully involved in it, it's not something I would want to see government stepping into. Okay.
You mentioned earlier roads, and wanted to ask you a few questions about that. Would you say that Indiana's roads and bridges are adequate for the current economy, for the current state activity, or not adequate?
I would say not adequate.
Not adequate.
Yeah.
And do you have some proposals about what one would do to make that change?
Well, you know, I've said all along, I think the most important thing we can do for our roads is spend all of our road use taxes on the roads. And I've said before, Indiana does better than some states, but we're still not there. We use a lot of our road use taxes on other items. Certainly the federal part of our road use taxes takes an awful beating when it gets to Washington, and then what they dole back to us. So, you know, I've said before, and I hold to it, that if we would use 100% of our road use taxes on the roads, we'd be pleasantly surprised with how much money we had to put onto them. Is it enough? Who knows? You know, there's studies going on all the time, different commissions trying to come up with ways to raise money. And maybe we do need to raise more, but I don't think we can go to the people and tell them we need to raise gasoline taxes or we need to raise a wheel tax until we've already shown them that we're responsible with the money enough to spend it where it needs to be.
Well, I felt the need for a little more on the road on the way down here this afternoon, so with you on that
Gets
part.
scary, doesn't it, sometimes?
Some days. I know you've been at work on this notion that the money that's collected at the pump ought to be used for roads, and that was the historic view of what the gallonage tax has been all about. And now, of course, the sales tax is put into the state general fund. What I want to ask you is, how do you make up that loss to the general fund if you send all that money to roads? Let's take, for example, for sake of argument, that putting it on roads makes sense as it used to put it all on roads. But the majority of the sales tax money that's collected at the pump is going to pay for the public schools. And what I really want to ask is, do you have an idea on how to make that up, or do you perceive that the public schools simply ought to be made smaller? Should we have bigger classes, fewer teachers, fewer buildings that are really paid locally? But how do you make up that really considerable loss to the public education system?
Well, you know, we've put forth some plans when we talked earlier about doing away with the property tax, doing away with the income tax. I think it's something that needs to be done, and you know, we would replace it with an income tax and a use tax. And you know, people say, well, that's going to raise the sales tax, and of course it would, but we feel that's the fairer tax to go around, and then, you know, simply take a percentage of the sales tax that would be applied to the school, a certain percentage of the sales tax that would be applied to public safety. It's something people can see what they're spending. If somebody falls on hard times, they're not in danger of losing their home over it, which if you looked at the paper last week when I don't know how many counties run it, but they've started having the tax sales, and page after page after page of people losing their homes. And we think that's wrong, that the government should be able to come in and take somebody's home after it's bought and paid for. It takes so much money to run government. Now, whether you take it from people on a property tax, take it from them on an income tax, or take it from them on a sales tax, it's going to take the same amount. And we think the fair way is the sales tax. Certainly we would downsize government to some point where it wouldn't be as great a percentage as trying to maintain government at its present level. But we think it's a workable plan and a fairer plan, and something that people can understand. Most people can't understand why they pay one rate on their house and an identical house next door pays more or less, and it's the way it works. You know, do you own it? Do you rent it? Is it a business? Are you older? Are you younger? You know, there's so many variables in it, and when government gets involved with taxation and makes it as complicated as they can, you know, people end up being the loser. So what we'd like to see is taxation made as simple as it can.
Is there any tension between you and the National Party on this question of income tax? As I understand it, the National Libertarian Platform calls for the abolition of income tax. Is it only federal income tax that the party's opposed to, not state income tax, or is there actually a difference of opinion?
Well, I would say there might be a difference of opinion, but I'm in favor of
state
doing away with all income tax, so, you know, and replacing it all with the sales tax.
With sales tax, okay. I wanted to ask you about quality of life. It is a question that many of our commission members looked at very carefully. And they looked at it, they came up with somewhat different answers or different emphasis depending on where they lived. The people who were in the urban commission were most concerned about roads, streets, transit. People from mid-sized communities were concerned about their ability to make decisions about rebuilding roads because the revenue system was so confining. And by the time they got done paying for the sheriff's department and the fire department, there wasn't a whole lot of flexibility. And the rural areas are concerned about quality of life because much of what is an attraction or can be there are things like natural areas, natural attractions, forests and the like. Is there anything that the state can do that would support quality of life efforts in those kind of places or those different settings?
Well, you mentioned that, you know, the three different groups came up with different answers on what makes quality of life.
Well, pick one or two.
That's the way that's how people are.
Right.
People have different ideas on what adds to their quality of life. So, yeah, when you ask what the state can do, the state cannot tax people so much and allow them to invest their money in what makes their quality of life better. You know, we have trails, walking trails around that everybody supports and a very small percentage use. You know, that's something that shouldn't come out of the road use tax. It comes back from the federal government, some of it of road use taxes. And that's something that people that use, the same as a park, you know, people that support their own church, you know, it's not something that we have to have government involvement in. Because we'll never get everybody to agree on what constitutes quality of life. Everybody has something different. So that's why we keep, what we would like to see is government staying just as small as possible and allowing people the flexibility to, you know, create whatever quality of life they choose.
Well, let's take the trails as an example. Is it your view that I recently saw a presentation on the extension of a trail along the Monon in Delphi, Indiana, or near Delphi, Indiana, a very small community. Is it, in your view, a good policy for the people of Delphi to decide to use some of their tax money to make that happen, or should they not use tax money to make it happen and try to raise the money in the private sector through charitable contributions and otherwise?
Well, there again, is it the best thing to do would be let them to keep their tax money, you know, and spend as they say. You know, if we take our tax money and it is designated where it's going to go. When we talk about this percentage is going to be designated to the schools, this percentage is going to be designated to public safety. Is there room in there somewhere to say, well, we're going to take 2% and just cast it out there and let people do whatever they want to with it. You know, I'm of the point, why don't we let them keep the 2% and they can decide then? You know, we have a society that works pretty well together for the most part. If there is a group of people that says we want a walking trail, you know, get together as a group and fund that walking trail. There's a lot of people that aren't interested in walking trails, so why should they be forced, you know, to support something like that? So that's, you know, when you talk about how should the tax money be used, if it's not specifically for something, a legitimate government function, we think the tax money should be left with the people and they decide how to spend it.
Fair enough. I want to wrap up by asking a question about Indiana, its population, and how well the community works. We, over many generations, have, of course, concentrated on relations with the African American community. This is an ongoing issue. We now also have a very substantial number of Latinos who've come to Indiana, a good number of whom are here legally. Do you have any way about how we make this a place that welcomes them and works well for them as it has for so many others?
Well, you know, I can't speak statewide. I know in our community, you know, everybody works. Anybody that wants to work can work now. You know, as a society, We've made gains over the years. I talk to people about, you know, when I look at my grandparents' generation and then my parents and then mine and my kids and my grandkids, you know, we've become more accepting. That's not to say that there's not people out there that are, you know, still opposed to certain ethnic groups or whatever that way. But I think overall we're gaining as a society. We're becoming more accepting as people. You know, this when you talk about the Mexican community that has come in here. They're more than welcome most places. You know, they work hard. I think that we have a situation where people are concerned that they're going to be taking from our welfare system or not working off the books. You know, that's something, if we make welfare voluntary and if we go to a sales tax, then everybody pays that, whether you're here legally, illegally, or whatever. It's that type of thing. So I think a lot of times the race issue and you know, the foreign immigrant issue is more government driven than it is society driven. When you go out and talk to people one-on-one, you know, there's a lot. It's a lot easier to get along, see people get along out there than it is, you know, when it gets into the media or when it gets into the government. It's a kind of a wedge that is used to separate people. You know, I'm not saying there aren't a problem that exists out there, but I think as a society we've come a long way, and I think we need to celebrate that.
Well, we celebrate your coming this evening. We're grateful to you. It's quite a chore to run for governor, and we're thankful that you've offered yourself up and that you've come to have a conversation with the audience and others who are here tonight. So,
well, thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate it very much. Good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, be with you. And finally, will you join me in welcoming Eric Holcomb, Lieutenant Governor Eric Holcomb. There he is. Good man. Good evening. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Good to be with you. Thanks so much for making yourself available. We're grateful to you for coming.
Good evening, and to you all as well.
Yeah, right. When I thought about the many places you've sat or many projects you've been working on over the last 5 months, you've been in some pretty different settings. The one I wanted to ask you about is the office of Lieutenant Governor. My suspicion is that it looks like a different place than it does when you work down on the second floor instead of on the third floor. What about the office that you now hold has surprised you, or what is different that you didn't expect from your experience as state chairman, your experience in the governor's office and elsewhere? In short, what's Lieutenant Governor Holcomb do all day?
Well, 2016 has been unprecedented.
Yeah.
For many people, including myself. Yes. I am approaching my 6-month review, so to speak. To put it in perspective, all things are relative.
It's 5, but it's 6.
Yes, it's approaching. And I've loved every day of it. I don't know if I'm surprised by that. The office of Lieutenant Governor in the state of Indiana is somewhat unique and different than other Lieutenant Governor's offices around the country. We oversee in our portfolio numerous agencies and have additional duties, including counterterrorism and presiding over the state senate, Secretary of Agriculture, Tourism, Defense Development, OCRA, involved all over the state of Indiana. And so the day job keeps you very busy, but I've loved, as I said, every minute of it. In fact, I describe it that way. I say I have the I Love Indiana job because it's so ingrained in virtually all 92 counties in one way or another, and it's literally like opening a 1,500-piece puzzle box and figuring out how to put the pieces together, and it allows you an opportunity to work with folks all over our state. So it's a very fulfilling job each and every day, and I tend to look forward to the next 5 minutes as much as I enjoy the last.
Well, I was started from the notion that you would know the place fairly well from where you've been before. Anything about it that's different than it was 6 months ago? Or what's the Holcomb strategy been that maybe is a little different than it was on day one?
Well, I've tried to maintain my approach throughout the last decade plus, and that's to be very accessible and very transparent, very available, which requires a lot of travel. Having duties that keep you in Indianapolis at times is somewhat different, but I make a schedule that keeps me out on the court, so to speak.
I want to begin talking about our report and talking about the future of our state on the topic of education. You would know that although the number of people in Indiana who hold a college degree, a bachelor's or an associate degree, or hold a recognized certificate has been rising, we're still below most of the country. We're below most of the surrounding states. A, why do you think that is? And B, is there something we ought to be doing about that we're not doing now?
Well, we are, and we are on the right track. We've been, ever since the outset, going back as we celebrate our bicentennial this year, we've been pioneering and forging our own futures. Literally since day one, we've transformed our economy from a manufacturing into an advanced manufacturing economy. And because of that, I think what we're seeing come to fruition are these strong partnerships from start to finish. And what I mean by that is at the very earliest years of one's education throughout their whole career, what ticket to success are they pursuing? I hope from my perspective it's one that inspires them. But what that's called for is an alignment for what the true needs are, and where we're making tremendous progress is our Department of Workforce Development has really transformed itself from what folks used to think of the Work One centers as the unemployment office. It's really become the employment offices. These folks are dealing with big data. They're projecting 10 years out what the needs are going to be, in addition to where the jobs are right now. And it calls for this close, as I said, alignment between the business community and our schools, philanthropic interests as well. And so having those communities integrated with one another is really pushing us ahead on this front, quite honestly. And I'm proud of the efforts that we're making, and it's completely dependent upon getting that participation all over the state of Indiana. Many of your sponsors here today are meeting with the state on a very regular basis, saying these are what our needs are. And it's that partnership that's really making a difference for our state. And why, by the way, we have a record number of people employed in the private sector as we sit here today.
How does this form of combination that tries to sharpen up what the economy actually needs, where the jobs might actually be, how does it work backwards in ways that actually affect curriculum and how the colleges and universities shape what it is they offer to people?
That's exactly right, and it's stages of one's education. And so what I'm so gratified to see is STEM programs now being offered because they're needed, but now being offered in junior high schools. And that's because the industries are telling us we've got to have more people involved in science and technology and engineering and math. And if you go to Purdue, as some people in the crowd have, then Mitch Daniels might throw in, he calls it STEAM because of agriculture and aviation, aeronautics, but all requires those skills. And so that is our schools rightly responding to the way of the future. And really what it comes down to is an opportunity in the future. And so having that alignment, having the discussions with our universities, whether they be our flagship universities or our private school, small private school network, all contributing toward the production of the skilled workforce that Indiana needs to continue to lead. That's because of our collaboration, and it's working. We need to do more of it, always.
Well, I think the alignment issue is one that's been well thought through. I haven't watched it at close up, but it's an advancement over where we used to be. You would recognize that a lot of people in higher education would say they're being asked to do more with fewer dollars. Where do you stand on that proposition? Do we have an adequate overall investment? Or maybe put another way, would a highly thoughtful, aligned system from college to employment still leave us short because college is simply too expensive and not accessible to a bunch of people who could benefit from it?
Well, I mean, yes, there could always be more, but it starts at the pre-K level. We can do more on that front, which I'm leaning into myself. We in Indiana spend over half of our budget on K through 12, in K through 12. That's a good thing. We just increased it in the last budget cycle, $474 million increase. That's a good thing. Can we do more? Yes. But you have to balance that with all the other needs, including higher ed, including truly measuring, and that's why I'm so excited about what the Department of Workforce Development is doing, because they're cracking this code. They are identifying where, or charting the course that we need to go because of, again, some of your sponsors who are participating, who are all sitting around one table, saying these are our needs, these are our shortfalls, and the market, so to speak, will respond to that, and is.
One of the features of that activity, of course, is connecting local leadership to state leadership and to the institutions themselves. So I want to ask you a broader question about the state of local leadership, because our three commissions all thought that we weren't doing everything we could do and need to do to develop and connect leaders at the local level to things either that are happening in their own communities or that are happening in the state level. The Urban Commission thought that we needed some kind of program for fellowships that would bring people into urban areas and give them a chance to help build a better place. The mid-sized communities thought we needed training programs for leaders, and the state has just has done some of that, mostly on the nonprofit or business level. And the Rural Commission, very concerned about loss of some of the best and the brightest, maybe not lost to Indiana, but it lost from rural counties that are
urban areas,
where there's out migration. Do you think we have a strong enough set of local leaders, or as strong as we could? And depending on the answer to that, is there anything the state government might do to help move that ball?
We have strong local leaders, and that's a nonpartisan answer or acknowledgement all over the state of Indiana. I resided in Knox County and went through a Knox County leadership course that I thought was invaluable. Obviously, we have various civic clubs, Rotary, Kiwanis, et cetera, that are tapping leaders in their communities and again, addressing issues at the local level. The state, yes, it's a partnership for sure. Hundreds and hundreds of board positions, all the way from the Egg Board to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, all important. A service that really dictates the direction that our state will go in these different areas. But yeah, I think that the partnership is the most important thing between the state. And I should say, to circle back, if you attend a career council meeting and you see folks come from all walks, all business perspectives, small and large, that service is invaluable, and it's really they're developing the map for Indiana, and that's just because of that That's service. That's them volunteering their time, and at times the businesses, the companies themselves are investing in not just a training, as is the Department of Workforce Development, and the Indiana Economic Development Corporation with training grants, and all focused on retraining and attracting the workforce of the future. So it's everybody's responsibility, all hands on deck, and it is happening.
You've put a point on that most people wouldn't realize, which is how many appointments governors make to people who are going to actually run this or that. I don't know what the number is, but if it were 2,000, I wouldn't be surprised.
More.
It's more than that. And how one uses it in purposeful ways would probably really make a difference.
Well, our government is we the people, and it truly is reassuring when you realize just how many folks are carving out their personal time, in many cases, to drive to the Capitol and give of their time and their talent and their perspective, and it helps direct the course of the state.
Yeah. I want to ask you about an issue that was very important, most important to our Rural Commission, which is the absence of broadband or the limitations on internet connectedness in rural Indiana, and they see it as a tremendous barrier to economic development. They're trying to recruit a business that really needs high quality access. This is pretty, it's solvable in some large counties, relatively, have done some very good work. It's a lot tougher if you're a county of 10 or 20 or 30,000 to figure out how you make that happen. I've seen the map of Indiana, and it's striking how much of Indiana doesn't have access to good broadband. Is there anything the state government can do to try and solve that problem?
Yeah, when you stop and think that Indiana is 83% farm or forest, and you mentioned cost and the population, and then to add into that equation, oh, by the way, some of our terrain is pretty rocky and hilly and not straight shots.
Yeah.
These all add up, and cost. What is really, I think, at the core of this is the need for, you mentioned access, but also speed. And so you hear broadband a lot, and that's legitimate. It's a concern, and it's a need, and it's can be an equation changer. It can be the difference. But it's also wireless, and it's fiber. Different ways to go about this, and yes, the state has a vested interest in making sure that we're connected in that way as well, and we are focused on it. We're making some progress. My immediate predecessor, made some significant progress on this with the Broadband Community Ready program, and eliminating some of the hurdles so that the industries, the private sector, could go online and do a lot of the work that was cost prohibitive prior. But there are some other ways to invest, not just from a state perspective, but all levels of government, quite frankly.
So the state's role here might actually be financial, but it would also be regulatory or maybe deregulatory, depending on what the situation is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not just broadband. It's really a larger issue of connectivity in every respect. And so I was last week up in the region in Lake County and realized that the South Shore Line was built in 1916. So as we celebrate our bicentennial, you go back a century with this single track, right? And we're looking at Chicago, the third biggest economy in the country. And if you look at all the arteries, all the spurs that are going up into Wheaton and Naperville and all northwest of Chicago, and then you see this one spur come off, and you wonder, how are we going to attract population to that area? How are we going to reduce time? And it's fine that they work in Chicago. We want them to live here. We want to draw that population here, and we can have Gary can become the Teterboro, and Beverly Shores or Miller can become the Hamptons of New York. It can happen, but we have to connect, and broadband is one example of connection, and so would double tracking the South Shoreline.
And as would some road construction, which has been a part of the conversation in Northwest Indiana, as it is in other parts of the state as well. I did some searching, and I haven't found a Holcomb position on what we ought to do about that big infrastructure stuff. Can you tell me what your views are about whether whether the state's doing enough, and should it do more on those things, and if so, how are we going to do it?
Yeah, we have to do more.
Yeah.
We have to not just maintain, but we have to build to the future. We have to continue to maximize our location. We can get our products not just grown and manufactured here, but we can get those same products out to 80% of the nation's population within 24 hours. That's a huge advantage. Mm-hmm. So while some may have mountains and coasts, we have central location. That calls for major road and bridge construction. Not just that. When you say infrastructure, you're also talking about more direct flights at the Indianapolis International Airport. We're ranked, that airport is ranked #1 year after year after year in North America. Doesn't mean we rest on our laurels and say we've got the #1 airport in North America. We need to continue to add more direct flights. We know that matters, and it's part of our infrastructure. I want to build a 4th port. We have 3 ports in the state of Indiana. I want to build another one in southeastern Indiana. It will be an equation changer and continue to really maximize, again, our location. So it's road, bridge, rail, port. It's not just highways. It's also airwaves and seaways. So in addition to all the investment that we've made, and I'm just speaking from my experience going back to 2005, we've made tremendous amount of progress. Saturday I was in Delphi. I traveled on the Hoosier Heartland that sat unfinished for years, 1985 prior. We finished that. We finished the Fort to Port. We're connecting communities. We're not talking about starting to build I-69 in the southwestern quadrant. We're talking about finishing it, and oh, by the way, adding a 4th bridge over the Ohio River in Evansville, which you're pretty familiar with.
I'd be in favor of that.
Yes. Yeah. In addition to the 3 bridges we do in Jeffersonville, and one that was a little unsafe in Madison. So we are going to have a data-driven, long-term, sustainable infrastructure program, primarily focused on roads and bridges, but accounts for all the other modes of transportation as well.
Well, we know how much of this enormous leap forward was paid for. It was paid for by major moves, which turned out to be remarkably successful and done at exactly the right moment financially, as it appears.
Hasn't been done since.
Is the Holcomb administration willing to spend some money to do these things? I mean, these are expensive things. They are mostly not done by private investment. They're done by people who vote for taxes. What's your posture about that?
100% committed. I wouldn't rule out the private sector, though.
Well, there are places like the leasing arrangements in which really matter, but
I don't think you take anything off the table when you're going into analyzing all the data before you. Certainly, we wouldn't have had the $3.85 billion that was thrown at projects that were sitting on the shelves that we simply couldn't afford.
Right.
We will have to invest money outside of these P3 potential agreements from the state, obviously, and fully committed to that. It's not just an issue of building the roads for today. It's the opportunities that it brings. It's not just dollars. It's the opportunity when you see a Honda move to Indiana because we were able to say, yes, we have the money. Yes, we'll make the investment. Yes, you'll have your exit pronto. That was a huge factor, as will double tracking the South Shoreline, which, by the way, people are lining up with interest from the private sector on those kind of projects. So I would rule out nothing.
Okay. I want to ask you about
other than inactivity,
other than doing nothing,
or
all right.
leaving projects on the shelves.
Well,
yeah.
bravo. I want to ask you a question about the kind of place Indiana is and its changing population. We have ongoing discussions and very thoughtful activities for the long-term American issue of doing right by the African American community. But we now have a huge number of Latinos that have come to our state. A very large number of them here legally. What do you think we ought to be doing to integrate those immigrants into our economy, into our public institutions, and making them feel that Indiana's a place that wants them here?
Well, I just met Richard from Goshen College, so I'll use a current example, who informed me that 19% of the enrollees are Latino at Goshen. Yeah. And what we know is they will likely, that community, stay close to home, stay close to family. It's helpful having, in Elkhart County, having the RV industry and other opportunity, the jobs available. The RV industry in Indiana has a corner on 80% of the market on RVs. Incredible. I don't think you can think of another product manufactured, maybe in the world, where one county almost has a corner on it, or a monopoly on it, so to speak, a legal monopoly. But having those jobs available, having the workforce available post-college is a big deal. Or go across to the western border over to Fair Oaks Farm, this farm that started out as a family farm. It's now world-renowned, not just for what they do on the ag front and the technology that goes into it, cutting-edge technology, but also on the education front in terms of what the needs are and the demographics around the world and how we're going to continue to feed and fuel our futures. Fair Oaks Farms would not be the success story it is only because of their leadership. I think the family would tell you that. I think the leadership would tell you that. They'll tell you the reason why they are so successful is because of their workforce, highly Latino populated workforce. And so what we have to do is continue to be a welcoming, reach out and get folks in every community. You alluded to the African American community as well, but get folks involved, whether it's in the civic arena or the government arena, and encourage that involvement. I talk to mayors all over the state of Indiana who say that is their secret to success, whether it's in Frankfort or Newton County or Elkhart County.
You've added a lot of value to Indiana in the course of your public career, and we're all grateful to you for it.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking on the tough job of running for governor and for being lieutenant governor. And we're grateful to you for having come this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chief
Thank
Justice.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you have a good evening. Thank you. Well, friends, I hope you'll find yourselves in agreement with my thought that these set of conversations have been very helpful and thoughtfully conducted and fitting to the office that these three men hope to hold, and more importantly, fitting to the people in the state which they hope to lead. Having said that, I think it's important for all of us to remember that nothing that happens in Indiana's future, none of the policy choices that are made at the state or local level will happen solely because the person who becomes our new incumbent makes a choice to move in one direction or another. They seriously need all of us to be part and participants in making these things happen. And so we hope that as all of us leave tonight, we'll look for new ways to connect with our friends and neighbors, to make our voices heard in the public dialogue in the hopes that our aspirations for Indiana can be made real. We're grateful to you for coming this evening. Thank you so much. Good night and have a safe trip home. Thank you.
This gubernatorial forum is made possible in part through support of the members of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations, supporting education for a lifetime in the communities they serve.